and there's no way to engage these stories without engaging empire versus oppressed.
The thing is, you're really wrong because there's a lot of churches.
There's no way to properly approach these stories.
Honestly, or
honestly,
humbly,
or fully, or something.
Fully with the whole picture. Anyway.
Welcome to Liturgical Shenanigans, a Wayfolk Arts podcast, with your hosts, Hannah,
Phil,
Jackson,
and Maddie.
Hey everyone.
Hi.
Hey, welcome back.
We are
everybody.
approaching the end of Lent. You are here with us on Liturgical Shenanigans, and we're excited to talk today about some of these holidays that come at the end of the season.
Yeah.
In the Christian church, we're very accustomed to talking about Holy Week, and we have Good Friday coming, and of course Easter Sunday.
Easter Sunday.
Easter Sunday. Easter Sunday. But this week we're going to actually talk about Passover, which informs the stories of Easter, and kind of think about how we celebrate and honor that in our own worship settings and in our own personal practice. So
he's passing over
we're passing over
the mic.
Is it But is it helpful for us to kind of do a little bit of a background of
Yes.
what Passover is and how it connects to the Easter story?
Yeah, just briefly to kind of contextualize what we're jumping into. That would be good.
Sure.
Does anyone feel awesome and ready for that? If not, I can jump in.
Well, if you've ever seen The Prince of Egypt,
The same. Don't.
Yeah, no, like so original start of the Passover, or the observance of the Passover, is part of the Exodus story. It is the kind of
it's which plague?
it's the arrival
The
of
last plague?
the
Number
seventh,
10.
Yeah.
No, seventh, the 10th. Like seven? No,
Seven
it's
makes sense as a number
It
in
does.
the
It's
Bible.
a holy number, but it's not seventh. It's 10th. It's the plague of the firstborn, in which the people of Israel marked their doorposts with the blood of a lamb.
It's deeply upsetting, and we don't. The way we talk about it in church, I feel, does not give it the heaviness that it warrants. It's a. I made a joke about Prince of Egypt, but it is a haunting thing to watch, even in cartoon form.
yeah.
They
Yeah,
capture that
it's-
super well.
Huh?
They capture that super well.
They do. It's
The
beautiful.
chilliness, the heaviness,
Yeah.
it's not made light of. It's a thing I've always I think maybe a lot of us kind of struggle with that story about. I've seen it a lot on kind of gotcha reels on TikTok, Instagram, whatever, where people are protesting pro-life protesters, and God loves little babies, and then someone hits them up with like didn't God kill all the firstborns?
Oh,
Yeah.
goodness.
Which, okay, so also the reason it's such a heavy plague is the plague of the firstborns is if your blood,
Nope.
if the blood of a lamb was not over your doorpost, then the angel of God doesn't pass over you and takes the life of your firstborn. So upsetting.
Yeah. Deeply upsetting. A horrible last plague that
Yeah.
that kind of
Loss
led.
of innocence, and the way that that movie depicts it, like, I don't know, you go to bed trusting that your parents have the best of intentions. I would, in the most part, your best of intentions at heart, that they're going to keep you safe. Trusting that when they say probably, hey, these crazy people are putting blood on their doors, we're not going to participate in that. They are crazy people.
So-
that it's
Really
going to
great
be
episode,
fine.
guys.
Footnote. Let's footnote the awful for a moment. And the
And the joy of Passover.
and the reason that it like passes into a ritual moment to remember is it is the last straw that
Yes.
that breaks Pharaoh's resistance to God. And the people are able to leave Egypt after that night.
Because Pharaoh's son is taken.
There's a
death.
Well, and there's even like this is where we get interesting, and we can debate the non-violenceness of this, but the use of this in conversation around nonviolent resistance, that at this point things have become so awful
Yeah.
that yes, Pharaoh's son is taken, and that's shown as a piece of that. But like every firstborn son in Egypt is
Right.
taken,
Yeah.
and like the next thing that happens is. And this is a weird part of the story too, but the Israelites plunder the Egyptians, right? They go to them and like, hey, can you give us some cool stuff? We're hitting the road. And like, yeah. Take our stuff.
Right.
Because Egypt is done
Yeah.
oppressing these people. And when we look at nonviolent resistance today, whether in India or like the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King Jr. and this idea of like, as we see this, it's been brought to our attention, this injustice. And we can no longer, as a culture, hold this.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can't participate in the thing anymore.
Right. And so the plagues kind of serve that function of drawing attention to this injustice until there's no way even Pharaoh, who is God among, right, is the cartoon, the morning and the evening star, right, is a God among people, cannot maintain the rule and oppress these people any longer.
Well, it's the last reversal of which God is God. Is Pharaoh God or is God God? And the story of Exodus starts with all the Hebrew children being killed by Pharaoh, and it ends with God saying a reversal of that as well. So it's as far as that.
devastating.
Yeah.
And the joy of that is God's people get to go free.
Right. But there's much more to dig in there, and I'm cool if we want to dig in there. But for the final beat of context, the reason why we celebrate it this week in the Christian tradition, at least, it does line up this
Maundy
week in
Thursday.
general. Is that it's Monday Thursday, and on the night that Jesus was betrayed,
Having the Passover.
he was celebrating the Passover. And so it comes into our Easter celebration every year because it's the start of the kind of last.
Weekend.
The last weekend. The story of the progression of Jesus from the gates of the city on Palm Sunday to the hill at Golgotha is kind of started in the moment of Passover. So we often engage this service with a Monday Thursday service, with a Seder, there's lots of ways that you can engage this practice, and we're going to just chat about that and maybe some more about the kind of complicatedness of the Passover.
Seder being the traditional meal of the Passover celebration,
Of remembrance of the
continuously
Passover, yeah.
celebrated by the Jewish people continuously without break, and often celebrated in Christian churches in different formats as Christian Seders, or sometimes Jewish folks invited in to lead it. Yeah. And also the idea of this meal being the source, not just of when we do our Maundy Thursday services, but like also our Eucharist, our Lord's Supper is a continuation or an interpretation or a revision.
An abbreviated version.
And a reinterpreted, right? Like Jesus
Yeah.
taking the bread and saying, this is what this means now, and taking the cup, which is the cup of blessing, the cup of
the new covenant.
the cup of redemption.
The cup of blessing.
Cup of blessing.
Yeah.
The cup of blessing is is one of the cups of wine that's taken during the Passover Seder, and Jesus puts more meaning, new meaning, additional meaning into it, and that we celebrate that.
Well, and even all the apologists' reference of Jesus as a lamb ties into this story again.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's all sorts of resonance with this story and the Easter narrative.
Which is interesting because the Passover lamb, and I've had some interesting conversations on this recently as we've been talking about different kinds of theories of atonement, that the Passover lamb isn't in that sense like a sin offering kind of lamb. It's a meal, right? Like slaughtered to be prepared for this dinner. And this idea of Jesus as the Passover lamb, as opposed to say like a Day of Atonement sacrifice is really interesting too. What does that mean?
That meal is supposed to sustain you on the journey you're about to set forth on
Into freedom.
too. Yeah.
How does the blood of the lamb turning aside the angel play into that as well then too? Because certainly the meal of the lamb, the lamb is the centerpiece of the meal, is the like, we're going on a journey together, we need the sustenance. And also there's this like, we're covered, protected by virtue of the blood over the door.
It's our mark. Yeah. And also the unleavenedness of like you ain't got no
Sure.
time to let your bread rise. Cook it real fast, like cook it now. and eat it. The hurriedness, all of that is stuff we can chew on right now.
Yeah.
Maddie has a thought.
I do, but there's something there too about like receiving everlasting life. Like continuously death turns away from you if you're partaking in the thing. Death in a metaphorical sense. Obviously, we all die. We don't we might become zombies. There's some interpretations of the Bible that make it seem as though zombies will rise up from the ground. But it's like a new way of living. Forever. Just
Yeah.
this is what I mean. That's why you don't look at me when I have a thought. It was not fleshed out.
No, there's lots of flesh, and the flesh is sloughing off of these. So, where I was thinking would be interesting to go is the rejecting death, rejecting, that cycle that Jackson pointed out about. I think it was you, right? The Israelites, or was it Maddie? That the Israelites experienced death at the hands of the Egyptians.
Oh,
and then Egyptians firstborn death in the hands of this plague. And the blood as like a block from that.
Yeah.
And the mark of Christians as this community that is something other, that is a turn the other cheek community, that is a nonviolent community. And this feast, this Passover feast being a feast of redemption, of freedom, of liberation. What are we celebrating liberation from, whether we're talking about Easter, Passover, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of opportunity there for you to continue your Lenten practice of whatever has been lamented. We've talked a little bit on the show focusing on Isaiah 58, but really, like throughout the season of Lent, there is much to be focused upon. So I don't know that there's necessarily one thing that you could say, but it's an excellent opportunity to bring in all the lament of systemic injustice, all the lament of creation.
You could also make it deeply personal and subjective. Your individual oppressions.
Yeah.
What am I trying to say? Yeah, that's correct.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Because those are more general things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a wise insight. And what's really cool, so the liturgy that's typically used in a Seder meal, a Passover service, is a Haggadah, right? And
What was that word?
Haggadah.
Sweet. Some of us have lots of experience with the Seder. I maybe went to one when I was like 6,
I've never been to one.
but I don't
Hopefully I said it right.
we don't know.
Haggadah.
That's how I've mostly heard it.
Mine was a Messianic Seder, so I don't know what it was.
Oh.
Shoot. Well, we'll look it up and change my pronunciation
No,
after the
yeah,
fact if I'm wrong.
Yeah, just sin boldly.
Cool booklet thing that typically is present and people use it as a liturgy. And there's somebody leading the service and walking through it, and there's often songs in it. But it is like from group to group can be slightly different and with different intentions and slightly different focuses. There's some things that are always the same, I think. But there's some really cool, intentionally focused versions out there. And I know of one that I've been reading and enjoying and we're going to be playing with a group that I am part of this week. And it's an LGBTQ plus focused one, and recognizing it's still, created by a Jewish community and for a Jewish community, but it is looking at the parallel narrative that is told in this story of liberation. And that's the thing with this story. It keeps getting told over and over because we're never quite done with liberation.
Yeah.
And the Jewish people have experienced this for millennia. And so have a lot of other people groups that resonate with the story. So it was a really important story if you look at through like the American slavery story and the spirituals and gospel songs that have risen out of that reality. And so looking at it through an LGBTQ plus lens and being able to like have this meal that celebrates and mourns and names the need for continued remembering of the story of liberation and hope. It's so cool to be able to sit and celebrate this meal that remembers ancient liberation and a story that's still being told and isn't done yet.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you get to be part of that story.
Yeah, because it's now. And so like I think that's where this is so beautiful. Is we can definitely use this story of. It can be really disturbing as we get into who God is and why would God kill the firstborn and how does that work. And this story is not so much a one-time story as an always story.
Yeah.
Of believing that the creator of the universe is on the side of the oppressed and is interested in the liberation of the oppressed. Mm-hmm. And I would say the liberation of the oppressors from this worldview, from this cycle of violence that they are just as captured by, just as robbed of good life and community by.
Yeah.
Talking a lot this time. So, yeah, what other thoughts do you have? How have you experienced? Hannah shared you haven't had much experience with Seder.
I haven't really. I went to one when I was little, and I remember parsley and salt water. But I don't.
Surprisingly tasty.
Surprisingly
tasty.
Even though it's tears. Oh no.
Yeah, but I don't remember much else from that meal.
I remember one time I helped you, Phil, set up for a Seder meal, but I didn't participate in it. You guys were having a rabbi come and lead the church or the congregation in one, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't remember. I have mixed feelings about what participating in a traditional Seder means for Christians and should look like. There's a part of me that feels like it's appropriation to just as Christians lead and do this thing. It feels like it should be led by a rabbi or a Jewish leader or teacher for it to be right or correct. What word am I missing there? On the other hand, I believe that God grafted us into God's family and there isn't separation anymore. So that would mean that those traditions are my traditions too. However, that also is deeply complicated because not all people believe that I have been grafted in, and I have not had the Jewish experience of oppression or life or traditions. So I have very mixed feelings about it, which has made me really hesitant to participate because I don't like participating in things if I don't feel 100% good. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm worried about accidentally doing something harmful that I would prefer to not do it at all.
Sure.
But I also don't want someone to think I'm saying if you've done this, you're participating in something harmful.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. And so I don't know.
I think we there is something important to note that needs that we do well to name that for a long time the church has been particularly oppressive of Jewish people.
Yeah.
And so for us to grab this and say, well, this is ours, I think is accurate. We have the same scripture. That scripture definitely informs the New Testament stories that shape our tradition. I think we miss out on what our tradition is.
Absolutely.
When we erase that.
I agree.
And we've done a lot of that. And we've harmed the people for whom this story is particularly significant and was originally told.
And we've adopted it in ways that are nice for us.
Yeah.
Convenient.
Convenient. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
For us, and they're missing the mark. Not always, but oftentimes in the ways that we've Christianized the Jewish tradition.
Well, and what does it mean for this meal to be celebrated by empire?
Yeah.
By the people in power.
Yeah.
I think we need to be very thoughtful as especially white American Christian people.
Yeah.
Telling this story and not making it about us.
So I feel
because we're probably the Egyptians in this story in most cases.
So I feel like the way to do it is together. That to me feels like the most honoring the tradition and who whistled, and who it was initially started for, while also honoring the belief that we as Christians hold, that we have been now adopted into this ongoing story that Phil talked about, and we get to play a part in it, which means retelling the story via the traditions of the past. Yeah, and we're all players in the story, and what does coming together to do the thing well look like? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I have some similar kind of complicatedness around it. We practiced a Seder meal yearly growing up, but it was a messianic Seder meal, so it was the version that like wrapped some of the Jesus narrative into it, and brought in, just like tied the story, connected it to Easter for us. And there is some complication there. There is some worry about appropriation there. There is some like wondering around like maybe that is a good way to say like this is different.
Yeah.
Like we know it's different.
Yeah.
You almost like want to put a little like prescript in it of
Yeah.
like this comes from something else that is still practiced every year. And this is a different version. It's very reminiscent. It's very honoring of that version. But I think the other risk is to deny yourself a ritual significance.
Yeah.
And it was very ritually significant to me to get to engage it every year. And it certainly made me much more like I'm much more of an Old Testament scholar, and my focus in seminary was much more on Old Testament, and so much of it was because I was steeped in it as a family, in this narrative that would not allow you to say the New Testament is where we're focusing.
Yeah.
Like it's like the whole story matters, and you need to know the whole story in order to understand the story of Holy Week.
Yeah.
So I'm deeply grateful for the experience of having done it. I do carry some of that uncomfortability and wonder. And also, I am hopeful that we find ways to still hang on to ritual significance, as a way forward with it.
And I would, that's where I would agree with you. I often say I feel that we are missing out, we're lacking, that we're not still engaging the rituals of the Old Testament, especially the one like we weren't really told to stop them.
Right? Yeah.
I think particularly of the Sabbath, how we have gone so far away from engaging in the Sabbath and the way we're called to do so biblically. And isn't that what tradition is too? Anytime we engage any tradition, somebody did it first,
right?
Probably better, and it likely looked very different for that context. And now we've made it our own, and it's significant for us in that way. Yeah. And I think like sitting in tension just is also part of the biblical narrative.
Biblical narrative,
it's just
human
life,
narrative.
Yeah, the life with God is this Passover story is tension. It's death and life. It's freedom, and I guess freedom for the Egyptians, but at what cost? Right. We are called to sit in that tension. It's not so black and white, and so those of us who sometimes want the black and whiteness are going to be uncomfortable. And isn't that also what we're called into? Is discomfort? Because out of that discomfort comes change.
Yeah.
And I also think, anyone who claims, well, this is the right way. Well, that's the right way because that's what makes you feel comfortable. And does that actually mean that that's the right way?
Hot take.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
That's all. Again, I don't have the answer. I am trying to figure out how to be okay with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And also, I still want to be comfortable enough to engage a thing that I at least trust that I'm not being harmful, and I just don't know how to do that.
It's that safe enough to be useful thing.
Yeah.
Well, and also, like being willing to engage a thing, knowing you might accidentally be harmful.
Right.
And
my worst nightmare.
Being willing to be corrected and engage anyway, knowing that it's going to be worth it to engage it, even if you have to fail and learn from it too.
Yeah. And end of the day, either way, Holy Week, we are engaging it because it is part of the Easter story.
Yeah.
It's how we engage it that really just depends on your individual experience, your individual invitations. Have you even been invited to engage it in a deeply traditional way? Or or not engaged? I didn't go to a church that celebrated Maundy Thursday until 2019. That's a lot of time being a Christian, not even knowing what Maundy Thursday was. Some places don't talk about that at all.
Yeah.
Talk about Good Friday,
Yeah.
which is similar, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and I think we miss out on a pretty big gift too of I don't know about y'all, but I've known a lot of Christian-y people who talk about being a New Testament. Well, you talk about this a bit, being a New Testament Christian and being confused about the God of the Old Testament is this grumpy, angry, whatever, and the God of the New Testament is
It's better now.
And this recognition that things like Passover give us a really helpful through line. I think that breaks up that clean dichotomy that I would say is rooted in racism, but we could have more talk about that on our after show.
There you go.
We're
Sorry. No, you go.
No, I was gonna land us. So
nice.
Say your thing.
Well, just as kind of a parting volley in that category. I agree with you. I super agree that the through line. Walter Brueggemann. I'm reading Walter Brueggemann's Prophetic Imagination right now, and he has another great book, Sabbath as Resistance, that actually goes into a lot of this.
Yeah.
Where you can't the two narratives that are woven in both sides of this Passover narrative, the Exodus version and the Easter version, is what you said earlier, Phil, this empire versus oppressed.
Yeah.
And there's no way to engage these stories without engaging empire versus oppressed.
The thing is, you're really wrong because there's a lot of churches.
There's no way to properly approach these stories.
Honestly, or
honestly,
humbly.
or fully, or something.
Fully with the whole picture. Anyway, but that's a
With
route
integrity.
to black and white as well,
Yeah.
Maddie, from what you said earlier. The route to black and white in this is both stories are a story of God choosing the oppressed, choosing the ones for whom empire is oppressing, and finding a way towards liberation.
Yep.
And the oppressors having to admit they've been oppressive and release at a horrible cost. But
Yeah.
No. So,
Death of the firstborn in both cases, which is such a fun reversal. Fun in the sense of like mind bending.
before you land
Yeah, please.
this plane, I do also think it's good to note this story in particular can be used so harmfully, both for the oppressed and the oppressors.
Yeah.
And I think very quickly, at least, it can become, so all you bad people are going to be punished. And if you lose a child, if you experience death, if you experience this painful thing, it's punishment.
Yeah.
And at least that's not what I'm saying. And I don't know that I read that text that way. It's within the larger framework of a story that is ongoing, that was ongoing up until that moment.
Yeah.
And to cherry pick it, it happens, it's dangerous and cruel. So also just carefully tread, because we're all carrying the weight of our own traumatic experiences and the ways that we feel we may have been punished for being oppressive people. And just this is one of those texts that can so quickly become just about that. And it's not that it's not about that. It's not that that isn't a piece of the story, but that isn't the complete end of the story. And that's not what we're saying today.
Well, or is it? And with that,
Oh my God.
well, no, we talked about before we started recording today that some of the harder or chewier, meatier, spicier takes of this are things that we want to save for our after show. And our after show is something that you can get your hands on by following us on Patreon or supporting us on Patreon. So we want to invite you to do that, and we'll be posting that about a week after we post this show here. So that'll be Easter week, right? The week after Easter, we're hoping to be posting
we will
it.
be in Eastertide at that point.
Ooh. So if you'd like to join us for some of those spicier, trying to figure out how to navigate the hard stuff conversation around these stories, these traditions, please join us over there. How do they do that?
Patreon.com/Wayfolk Arts.
Yes.
Amazing.
And backing at any level means you can grab onto our after show and some of the other cool stuff we put there.
Also, whether you're a Patreon or not, you can find us on Discord, and we really want to hear if you've engaged a Seder before. What does Passover look like for you? What does Holy Week look like for you? Come talk to us about it and other things. There's lots of channels on the Discord that you're invited to.
Yeah, and if Discord isn't your path at the moment, we also have an Instagram, we have a Facebook. We'll be posting at least one or two things over Holy Week over there on the Instagram. So commenting on those is a great way to do at. It's a great way to get in touch with us and have a conversation there as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're on the socials, on the Discords, on patreon.com/Wayfolk Arts for more content around this. Thank you all so much for listening. It was a joy to get to share this conversation with you. And we'll see you all for sure in 2 weeks.
Goodbye.
Much love, friends.